Hey guys, so in today's video we're going to be talking about Countless Worlds. This is a game that just came out for a test, and it is similar to games like Critical Adventure, which is basically the start. And what they did was they used this as like I'm pretty sure a building point and made a pretty cool game, which was out for a little bit. I did not know it was a stress test, but that is okay. Other than that, I'm just gonna be talking about the game and how great it is, and yeah. Alright, so let's get into it. Let's start by talking about, well, starting off. To start, you basically just walk forward and enter the town. And right off the bat, you'll notice the consumable stand, which sells potions and food items. The equipment stand, which sells weapons and resources. And the crafting stand, which is used to craft items, which I'll get into about a second. The resources part of this is you can get resources doing a lot of things. One of them, collecting apples and tangerines off of trees. You could also go mining for items, which is a lot of fun. But the biggest and most important part is killing the monsters for resources. Once you get these resources from killing monsters, you can take them to the crafting table and craft items by dragging the item you wish to craft with, and it will show you a bunch of recipes you can use with that item to craft into, which is one of my favorite aspects of this game, is crafting. It's so much fun to get items and then make them on your own and decide what you want to make. Something that would have been nice is knowing what stats my things would have when I crafted them, but it was fine. They could work around that and fix that later on. But other than that, crafting is one of the biggest parts of this game, as that's mainly how you're going to get your items. I mean, yes, there are items and weapons that you can get from mobs or bosses, whatever you want to call them. But those are only specific items. You cannot get the craftable items from the bosses. I mean, I'm not sure about that, but don't quote me on that. But one of the biggest things that I enjoy as well is the map, and just exploring the vast map, because it is just great. The aesthetic to it, just looking around for the chest and finding items that you can use in combat and stuff, it's just great. You could travel underground, you can travel on the water, you could travel and find lost castles and all sorts of shit. It's great. But let's move on to what this game is really about, and that's the combat. Alright, the combat to this game is pretty simple. Walk up to enemy starts throwing attacks, dodge attacks, jump at the little bubbles. Simple, right? Well, you also have health, which can be upgraded with stat points putting into it. Shield, which is a variant of health in a way, which doesn't drain health but has its own separate bar which will go away separately. Mana, which is used for magic. Magic, which deals magic damage. And then damage, which will affect your damage and how much damage you do with your weapon and so on. Each weapon has a different playstyle to it. For instance, some weapons have a bounce class, which is a combo class almost. If you let the bubbles lay out one by one, you get 3 of them out, and if you hit all of them while still in the air, it will count as a combo, and this will deal more damage. Next you have Flurry, which this works in a little different way, but how it works essentially is you hit slashes, you can get up to 3. There's going to be a big red slash one. You hit that one, depending on how many slashes you have, yellow slashes will appear for a short amount of time, letting you get some extra damage. Personally, my favorite class right there. Next is Piercer. This class is a little similar to Bouncer, but doesn't have a combo, and instead, if you hit multiple of them, a red one will appear and inflict bleed and do a lot of damage. And then we have, I don't know if it's what you call it, but I'm gonna call it Berserker. And how Berserker works is, if you hit multiple ones, and then you'll get a red one. But instead of this one dealing damage, it makes you red and move really fast. And all your little damage points become red, and they will deal more damage. And then you have Bow, which is one of my favorite ones, but sadly couldn't use a lot of it because there were only 2 bows in the game at the time. How this one works is, each time you hit a bubble, an arrow icon will appear, and if you grab a arrow, it will add to your damage if you hit the attack. So basically, if you were to hit a ton of attack at once, get a ton of arrows, then attack, you deal a ton of damage. And then the last one is Mage. And how this one worked is, each time you'd hit an attack, you'd get a star bubble. And this star bubble would surround you and follow you around. And there are magic abilities, which you can get at stores, and might be able to craft later on in the game, which you can use, that cost mana. But if you have a ton of these star bubbles that are around you, and use magic, they all go away, but in return, make your damage very high. I would also just like to talk about the mobs for a little bit, because the monsters that you fight are amazing. Each fight feels like its own separate boss battle. The golems, they throw giant boulders around, and if you run, and they stay in the ground, so you have to avoid them while jumping to attack your enemy, and if you hit them, you take damage. The bees, they lay out poison and slowness, so you have to be very careful in fighting them because they could take you out in a few seconds if you're low level and low HP. The slimes, they lay out a ton of slime. The foxes, they throw out a ton of spikes everywhere. Each and every single one of them has their own unique pattern, their own unique style you gotta learn to fight against and counter and beat them to get the stuff that you want from them. It is just great, and I love the fact that you can do this with people, because playing this game with friends is really fun, especially when like you can get a ton of HP on some like random boss or guy. It is so much fun. But enough of that, let's move on to crafting. Alright, so crafting this game revolves around what resources you drag into the crafting. Basically, you'd grab your resource, and then you'd drag it in, and then it'd show you a bunch of recipes of what you could use to craft with that item, and how much of it you might need to craft an item. Like, for example, you get a bunch of stingers, you could see, oh, I can craft a bee sword with a bunch of stingers, so I'm gonna go get some more. Or you could see, oh, I have a ton of spiked fur, I'm gonna craft a dagger. Or, hey, I have a mana gem, I'm gonna use that and craft a mana necklace, you know? Stuff like that. And that's the great thing about this game, is that you have like free will of what you want to craft. Like, you could get all these crazy weapons and get lucky like with RNG and get like super buff bat orb sword or dagger of swiftness and stuff like that. And they all have different stat points, each different weapon. Rapiers, some of them have faster speed than daggers. Daggers have more orb spawn time. Spears, they have more pierce power, and so on and so forth. And they're all separated by what style they use and what stat points they have. Like, for example, katanas and daggers are both flurry, but katanas might do more damage but have less speed, and daggers might do less damage but have more speed. And that's what's great about this game, is that there's no limit to what you could do. Well, there is, but like, you get what I'm talking about. You could do a lot of stuff with these ideas, you know? Come up with new weapons, make new materials, and just, you have a big community out there. And you could probably get some people to come up with ideas, even if the creators can't come up with any. But this game is just great, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen next time it comes out. I hope it does, at least. But now, let's get into the final section, which is the boss, the Pumpkin King. Alright, so getting into the boss fight. I was not prepared for this at all. I did not expect that you'd need so many health potions and golden apples, and I did not expect that you'd get like almost one-tapped by this guy. He was incredibly strong, and for all the right reasons. He was an event boss, and it was perfect. This fight to me was flawless, at least in my opinion. I had a lot of fun with it. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, he did so much damage. Yes, his attacks were crazy hard. But it was just so much fun. The accomplishment from beating him just blew all those things away. It was just great. The amount of like you gotta think really quick fighting him. The amount of like time and effort it took to understand how he played, like throwing his head off, throwing a bunch of pumpkins around, the magic puddles that would surround you, and you had to go through a certain circle area. You had to dodge his slashes, his giant laser beam, his ghost fire. Then there were these balls that circle around you and then enclose on you, and you had to be in a specific moment to dodge that attack. And all while you're avoiding this guy's attacks. You also have to be worrying about how you're going to deal damage, and your HP, and your shield, and when it's going to be back up, and can I make this risky move to hit this attack and get some damage in, or will I get hit by something coming at him? Because it was just such a great boss fight. There was just so much going on. And the amount of times it took me to beat this guy, it was just all worth it. I may have not gotten anything. I may be losing all my items. It was worth it. This was so much fun. I haven't had a boss fight in a game like this, in a Roblox game, for so long that just, it was so much fun. It truly shows like what they can do with this game, like that the level of skill that this game can take can escalate. The difficulty can escalate. The bosses and the fights that they can bring to the table with this can escalate. There's probably, when this game releases, there's probably going to be tons of bosses that do damage like this. It's great. I guess what I'm trying to say is that this boss fight just moved me, and it convinced me that this game was just great, and I can't wait for it to fully release. But sadly, this was also on the same day that the game was, well, going out of testing and gonna be shut down again. So I met up with a guy named C4D who was gonna try and beat the boss before the time ran out. I helped him beat it. We beat it, and then we rode boats around searching for One Piece, and then we managed to get boats on land and rode them around like a hoverboard. Which, hoverboards? Good suggestion right there. But at the end of the day, I'm making this video just to convince you to join the Discord, support the game, check it out at least. And if you'd played the testing, like, just comment what your class was if you played the testing, like how much you enjoyed it, and just tell me about it. I love comments. But other than that, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later.